Good morning, and welcome to the Black Mesa Transit System.
And we're back. Hello, everyone. Sorry for the massive delay there. We had some technical difficulties where we weren't able to get my streaming software to work correctly. But if you just joined into the podcast, my name is Ethan Braun. This is the Retro Rumble Podcast, Episode 8, where we talk about one of our favorite series, Half-Life. Who do I have here on the podcast with me today? I have Joel.
Hello.
And David, who just joined in. Oh, I guess David's not here quite yet. But regardless, we're talking about one of the most influential FPSs of all time, Half-Life. In case you haven't heard of it, started back in 1998 by this little company called Valve. It's been going strong ever since, except whenever it hasn't been going strong for like a decade now. But Joel, what's your history with Half-Life? Explain to me, how are you familiar with this series? What got you into it in the first place?
I was originally introduced to this by my cousin many years ago. Like, I think I was 8 or 9, and so it was actually kind of intriguing at first because I've never seen that type of game before. I usually played something like Age of Empires or Rayman 2. So it was a completely different genre to what I was used to. And so I think it was the first ever FPS that I ever tried as well. I never really got too far into it.
Well, that's a good FPS to be your first one, for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. As for experience on it, I don't have too much. I played a bit of the second, a bit of the first as well. So
but
apart from that,
regardless of that,
think
you're pretty knowledgeable on the lore of Half-Life, if nothing else.
Yeah, that's I know the basic lore of it because it is very intriguing. The whole world as it is then the Nihilith as well. Wow, I can't pronounce that. I'm terrible at pronouncing.
Niholinth.
Nihilith. And the whole Combine story arc as well is actually pretty intriguing as it is, especially for a game of its era. Most of the time, you will have a straightforward stories that don't really expand much on the world. For example, no offense to like Nintendo One or Mario and Legend of Zelda at the current point in time, Half-Life, in my opinion, was one of the biggest steps in terms of gaming, in terms of story, in terms of graphics, gameplay, that sort of thing. So it's really awesome. It's a really awesome game all around, and I'm actually glad to know about it.
Well, me too. I'm definitely glad to know about it. I have kind of a similar history as well. For my entire life, I've pretty much been like a Nintendo guy. Yeah, I mean, up until recently, actually, I really only played exclusively Nintendo consoles. Up until recently, whenever I got my own PC, I started building one, and I've been getting into a lot of, PC games, Half-Life being one of the most notable of them, obviously. So I would say about 6 months ago or so, I went on this big, long, Valve single-player craze, where I went through like the first Half-Life and the first Portal, Half-Life 2, then Portal 2. I really enjoyed them. So coming from a background of like almost 0 FPSs.
Hello.
Hey, David, how's it going, man?
Before we go live, my computer crashes for the first time ever. like total freeze up when the mouse isn't moving. You know it's something's not quite right.
Yeah.
But no, we're here now. We're here now. So we'll wait for Joel to come back.
Well, David, what's your history of Half-Life in the meantime?
Well,
how'd you get introduced to the series?
Well, I was listening to a Joel there talking about or you guys talking about your intro, and I was trying to think of I was trying to recall actually how I came to know about the game, and I have a very vivid memory. Well, let me take you back a bit further. My first computer, my first Windows PC, was a piece of garbage.
Okay.
It was like a 133 megahertz Pentium something or other. I think it had like 512 meg of RAM or something. It wasn't powerful even in its day. So what I would find myself doing a lot is going to places that sold PC games and staring at the specs for a ridiculous amount of time, trying to convince myself that it would run, but also at the same time being realistic and thinking it's not going to run, Dave.
So
and I remember
you're basically the ultimate like graphics hound, right? Like that was graphics make the game, right? That was you back then.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, you could say that. I thought because like I downloaded some relatively simpler games and they weren't running. Sure. My computer was just garbage. It was, it was like I worked in this computer shop and I got it for cheap, and it was like I bought it for £90. So that's a full computer, keyboard and everything. So obviously it wasn't all singing, all dancing. And I remember. And I was trying to think because I remember I had Half-Life, the bestseller edition of it. I'm not sure if it actually does anything to the actual version of it or what, but it was the bestseller copy of it. With the gold kind of like platinum PlayStation kind of thing, And of course, I was staring at the specs for ages, and I thought I'm just going to go with it. I'm just going to buy it, and lo and behold, it worked fine on the lowest setting.
Wow!
So for me, and it still looked pretty good. So for me, it was the only decent, really proper PC game that I could play. So it was the only thing I was playing at that time. So I just played it nonstop.
Wow, that's crazy. That's awesome. So you've been kind of on it since the very beginning, right? Like what year was this?
This must have been, I would take a shot and say probably 1999.
So yeah, not too far after the release in that case. I'm
trying to think of when bestseller would have been around. The bestseller edition would have been around. I would say probably after. What was the Game of the Year edition? I can't remember. But either way, it was like a re-release. So that's awesome. Couldn't have been less than a year. So. And I think back then I didn't have any sort of view of what makes a good game or anything like that. I think I was it gripped me in a way that I didn't understand how it was gripping me. Like I didn't realize how this game was something special, because I had nothing to compare it to. And of course, as time goes on, I did have something to compare it to, and that's why now I consider it to be. I go back and forth, but I consider it. I'm pretty certain I'm going to put it. If I was to make a list, I'm going to put it at number one for my best game of all time.
That's awesome. That's
because
fantastic.
Even now, with all the games I have potentially available to me, I still go back to it.
That's so cool! Wow. So this is definitely a pretty personal game for you. This goes back a long time. Oh man, that's so good to hear. Well, while Joel attempts to get back to the call, I believe
I just got back.
You got back.
Oh,
okay, Joel's here.
Yeah, sorry. It was in the middle of David speaking. So
oh no, that's fine. All right, that's fine. So
yeah,
so
apologies, internet cut out, and
that's fine.
I was very tempted to snap my modem in half. So
that's fine. We're all all having technical difficulties today.
Literally all of us.
Let's just move on. Pretend that nothing ever happened, and we're just going to talk about two of the greatest games of all time, actually, Half-Life.
Yeah.
So, guys, do you know how Half-Life started? Do you know where all good things start? They start at Microsoft. And like all good things, Gabe Newell, a young man working at Microsoft way back in like the 1980s. He worked there for about a decade or so. But one day he said, I've had enough. I'm fed up with this place. So he went off and he made his own company. And you know what that company was called? It was called Valve. Now Valve, they wanted to make their mark on the map, right? They wanted to venture out into the video game industry like no one ever had. but he didn't really have necessarily a reliable engine to work with. He knew that he wanted to make like a super realistic game that would change the face of the video game industry, and build it off of what Doom had done. Nonetheless, because obviously this is the late '90s, so every video game company is striving to be like Doom. So he got the what's it called, the Quake engine, I believe it is, from id Software, and him and his company were able to edit it enough and create Half-Life 1. David, Joel, do you guys know much about the development of the original Half-Life?
Not really, no.
Really? Okay. Wow, that's surprising.
I mean, I kind of have a general idea of what they were going for. That initially they thought about something in the vein of a Resident Evil type experience, first person, and the ultimate goal was to make something completely immersive.
Right. I know that at one point, it was either Gabe Newell or somebody else that said whenever they were going out to set out to make Half-Life, they wanted to make like this kind of Die Hard like experience. Like, have you ever seen the original, like the Bruce Willis Die Hard before?
Oh, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. That's my Christmas movie.
You think Half-Life kind of really nails that like Die Hard feeling to it?
Definitely, yeah. I never really thought about it that way. That kind of
me neither.
Warrior.
It's kind of like it's like science fiction Die Hard, which I never thought of before. So sorry.
I mean, no, I was going to say that I wouldn't compare Gordon Freeman to John McClane, though.
Sure.
Yeah, just that's my only observation. I mean, I think John McClane,
a little more sassier, right?
He's a cop, and right. He's also got the attitude and stuff like that, so he can handle himself. Whereas Gordon Freeman is just your cookie cut nerd, really, isn't he?
He literally doesn't have an attitude, right? He doesn't have one bit of attitude.
I don't think a single nerd can wield a crowbar and effectively take down a whole entire alien army by himself.
Oh yeah.
So.
Well, now he's a total badass. He's battle hardened. So in Half-Life 2, he was like formidable. The one free man and all that, and they knew who he was. But in the first game, he was just like out of his depth and just doing the survival thing, and had the crowbar and both trying to find a way out and also trying to find a way of solving the problem and rescuing people and getting help and things like that. But I mean, Half-Life 2, Gordon Freeman, I would compare to John McClane. In fact, I would say he was even more badass because he's fought aliens and stuff, and giant walkers. Yeah, and but original Half-Life, I think, he's out of his depth, but he just has to survive.
Well, regardless of how cool or how not cool or how nerdy Gordon Freeman is, Half-Life was originally based off of id Software's Quake engine, which was licensed from id Software. At the time, are either of you familiar with Quake?
Nope.
Not the games. No, not very much.
So Quake, basically, imagine Doom, but brought into actual polygonal 3D graphics and made online. Quake was very, very influential at the time of its release. And id Software, you've probably heard of them, licensed it out to Gabe Newell and Valve, and they edited most of the game's code, so it didn't actually end up being super useful for them. But that's the base engine that they used to create the original Half-Life. Half-Life was originally revealed in about E3 of 1997. Kind of caught the entire world by surprise, because we hadn't seen as much in the space of a first-person shooter like this before. There was a lot of first-person shooters at the time were really just kind of mimic what Doom was doing, but they never really went beyond that. And that's kind of what the premise of Half-Life was to bring the FPS genre into the next dimension.
Mm-hmm. I think games back in the Doom era were, or first-person shooters rather, were referred to as Doom clones because they were basically copies and didn't do much else. It was always the system of guns, progressively more powerful guns, progressively more formidable enemies, keys.
And in a way, I mean, Half-Life really is that.
Labyrinthine buildings and stuff, levels and stuff like that. So they were all pretty much the same.
Right. But Gabe Newell he had it from the very outset. He had this idea that, hey, no, we don't want to be a Doom clone. We want to make something completely brand new. And as we will see in a moment, I think he definitely succeeded with that. Anyways, Half-Life came out a year later after some revisions, after some internal team trouble. It came out a year later in what is arguably probably the greatest year in video game history, 1998.
Agreed.
Yeah, right.
Ocarina of Time came out as well.
Ocarina of Time. What else? There's some other games that came out then. I want to say like
Pokemon.
Yeah, Pokemon. That's right. Maybe it's like StarCraft. That might have been 97. I might be mistaken there, but
Wait, actually, wasn't Pokemon 2000?
no, Pokemon came out.
No, Pokemon I'm very sure was before 2000.
Pokemon
I'm
came
pretty sure
out
it was 99.
98 in the US, I want to say.
Hmm.
Yeah, but regardless of that, yeah, Half-Life came out in November of 1998. We're actually just about a month away from the 20-year anniversary of Half-Life 1. And like it kind of took the world by storm. Like in more than one way. It released, it got, I'm not sure how many downloads it got, but it quickly rose the ranks as one of the greatest first-person shooters of all time, and not only that, but one of the greatest games of all time. So that's enough about the development of Half-Life, though. Let's actually talk about the dang game. Half-Life 1 covers the story of Gordon Freeman, a theoretical physicist that arrives for, is it his first day on the job?
Yes.
Yeah, and he's late.
Okay. I was always confused by that because it seemed like the security guards already knew who he was whenever he came in, because they're always like, hey, we should grab a drink afterwards. But I guess it was his first day on the job. And it turns out to be his last day on the job as well. Very quickly, as whenever he goes into his first day, the
did Leon Kennedy.
Yes, yeah, oh, for sure, yeah. You want to explain what happens after he goes on to his first day, David?
Yeah, sure. So, as soon as he arrives, he comes to the reception. He's late. He's running late, and he also becomes aware of a very suspicious-looking hack job, I think, of the Black Mesa complex because their systems go down. And he's told to put on some safety gear. Safety gear is a famous HEV suit. And then to jump in the test labs. And there he has some what they would refer to as anomalous materials. The old chambers, the old test chambers called the anomalous materials test lab or something along those lines.
Right.
And this is giant machine in the middle of the room called anti-mass spectrometer, and he pushes the material into the spectrometer. Now the facility is secretly testing things like teleportation and weaponry and stuff like that, and that's precisely what this does. It opens up a teleport to a kind of border dimension called Zen.
It's called a resonance cascade, right?
A resonance cascade, yeah, and then it hits the fan from there on.
Oh yeah, and then for the entire rest of the game, you've got to avoid aliens as you climb and climb and climb your way to the surface. Not much unlike Die Hard, as we were saying, but regardless, yeah, and so you're avoiding aliens for the entire rest of the game, but as you continue to make your way out, aliens are not your only enemies in this game, are they? Joel, who's the other enemies in this game?
I'm pretty sure it's actually only aliens though. The aliens, they're different types. So the final boss is the Nyan.
That's true.
Sorry, I am so
Well, what I was thinking of is that at one point in the game, the U.S. military is sent down to supposedly rescue the science team that has been killed off basically by this alien threat coming through. And when you think that they're originally supposed to come down and rescue you, they're actually sent down to come and kill everyone that has witnessed the resonance cascade.
they're a cleaner squad. They're there to like kill any witnesses, and ideally, because the Black Mesa rather was previously like a launch site, so it's pretty much, as far as I would guess, already primed to explode quite easily. Right. So I think they're just going to go in there, wipe out all scientists, and then just blow the place up. And the military, I forgot what they called them. They give them a name. It was NE
I'm not
something
sure.
hazardous HECU. Hazardous Environment Contact Unit or
yes,
combat
that's
unit?
Right. That's right. Hazardous Environment Combat Unit.
And they are particularly special as well, because they were probably, and I could be wrong here, probably the first time that an enemy was more than just a creature that ran at you and you had to shoot it until it fell over. They actually fought against you and strategized against you. They would flank you and stuff like that. So they would genuinely. It wasn't just a case of firepower. Now you had to find a way to outflank them. You had to get it into a good position and stuff like that, because they will look to corner you. They were genuinely a tactical attack team.
Yeah, I remember playing that.
And can take a few bullets as well.
I think one of the most impactful moments.
I haven't actually played the first one, so I did not actually know about that.
Oh, well,
really?
Hopefully at the end of this we'll convince you, because
you need to play it.
Missing out.
Oh, you don't know what you're missing.
It's on Steam, man. It's on Steam.
Oh yeah, it's pretty cheap too. I think one of the most impactful moments in this game, actually.
Talk about the bomb. Were you referring to the bomb that actually blew up Black Mesa in the end?
Did it blow up?
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
In between Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2.
The explosion was the reason why the Combine even found Earth.
But
in
that's
the
a
first
topic.
place.
That's a topic for just a little bit later, after Half-Life 1. Once we start.
Apologies.
No, that's fine. Back to the kind of the Combine soldier. I think one of the most impactful moments in Half-Life 1 is the moment that not a Combine soldier, the Hazardous Environment Combat Unit comes down to rescue this scientist, and at that moment, you don't know that they're gonna kill everybody off. But then he shoots the scientist down, and you're like,
"That's a great moment as well."
Yes.
I remember that moment quite vividly, and I was like, "Did he just shoot him?"
Yeah.
Because he goes like, "Oh, thank heavens you're here!"
And then he
in that kind of stereotypical British accent, and then he runs at him, and then he gets gunned down, and then he turns. See it happen.
Yeah, and then he turns and he aims his gun at you, and you're like, "Oh no, buddy! Oh no, buddy! I'm shooting you down." And then you go into the next room, and the famous line, "We've got hostiles." And all of the soldiers come pouring down on you, and you gotta fight them all off. And from that moment in the game, Half-Life is a three-way battle between you, the aliens, and the soldiers. And the aliens and the soldiers, they're not on the same team. They'll fight each other too. I think that's another really, really cool kind of part of Half-Life that kind of calls back a little bit to Doom, where the monsters in Doom, they'll fight each other. They will straight up kill each other.
Yeah, they kind of they're kind of funny in a way, because they kind of they won't actually attack each other, but if they accidentally hit each other, then they turn around and they hold a grudge. If they get accidentally shot in the back by a colleague imp, a colleague imp, I should say. It sounded like I said something else. I was imagining a dog in a game suit, they just turn around and they start having a go at each other. So
Half-Life kind of references that a little bit with the whole alien versus soldier combat. What's going on, Joel?
No, I was just going to quickly mention, because I forgot to bring it up when we got to that point. Black Mesa is actually the rival company of Aperture's is it Institute or Research Facility? The company in Portal and Portal 2. They are rival companies.
That's true. Mm-hmm. That's very true. Again,
I thought that was a pretty interesting connection. So,
it is neat.
Yeah.
It is neat. Portal references the Black Mesa Research Facility a number of times throughout that series. But, so yeah, as you're fighting, you make your way to the surface. You go through a bunch of different places. We'll kind of wrap up what the ending of Half-Life 1 is in just a moment here. But I want to ask you, David, what really, as a first-person shooter, what really makes the original Half-Life so special?
Oh man, so many things. Well, I think In terms of like my own first personal experiences with enemies that are tactical, a cinematic experience from a video game. Up until that point, I was playing very, very straightforward games. Really,
Sure.
nothing so cinematic. Like I said, I didn't even know when I was playing it how special it was. I only came to appreciate it much later on, because I was realizing things like I was comparing it to Doom and stuff like that, and the way it seamlessly goes through one chapter. There's so many little things that they do to instill that immersive experience. So there's no levels. There's chapters, but you get nothing more than a name of this chapter. Surface tension. We got hostiles and captured. What's the one where he gets captured?
Yeah, you might
Anyway,
be right,
yeah, and of course I was loving it and fully immersed because it was such an incredibly designed game. What I think I find so special about it, it's really hard to put into words. Actually, I think.
Sure. I think one thing I really, really, really love about the original Half-Life, I think Half-Life's greatest strength is its aggressive linearity. To the point where Half-Life 1 is literally just a single level. If you really think about
but it does a really. You can actually go right back to the very beginning of the game.
It's true. It's absolutely true.
And also, it's linear without being linear. It does a really good job of making the environment feel explorative.
Yes.
Is that right?
Open.
Open. Yeah. And you're being led on a line a little bit. You're gradually being nudged in the right direction.
Yes.
But you as a player, you feel that you are really you're doing it yourself. You're figuring things out. You're finding these pathways. You're generally in Half-Life, if you're stuck, hit things with a crowbar, and you usually find your way through something. And then of course you're kind of wandering in a way, and then before you know it, and I like how the chapters kind of contrast each other, because you go from just a battle in an office to I particularly remember. It was not a fight. I was going to say a fight. I particularly remember the scene against when you fight the big three-headed creature that's hanging about in the pit below the rocket launching platform. I can't remember what they're called. But before that, it's completely different. I think it's I feel like it's the office area. I can't remember, but either way, the way the game surprises you, and because I can remember that thing genuinely freaked me out, because you can hear it banging in a kind of eerie way. You don't know what it is. You hear it banging, and then you come across a guy on the floor. I think he's a scientist, or he's a police a guard guy, and he says something like, "You got to be very quiet," or something like that. And then you just peek around the corner, and it's such a big creature, but it moves so quickly. And it looks like it could easily destroy its own environment, everything around it.
Right. Yeah, I know the creature you're talking about.
You get this impression that it's something really powerful, but it's also really freaky because it's bright green. It's got this one red eye, well, three of them, but they've all got this big long. It's like three long fingers with giant black nails.
Yep.
And it's kind of just, you go through a doorway and it's right there, And the way Half-Life does that goes from chapter to chapter. But in a nice smooth way. But every chapter feels different. Every chapter, is enjoyable for a different reason.
And I would call that seamless progression in a way. In order to, and also to complement that seamless progression of level design, I think there is an incredible progression of weapons in Half-Life 1. Because you start off the game, you don't have anything, right? You put on your HAV suit, you do your testing, right? And then you find the crowbar. You're still pretty weak, right? But then you find the pistol, and then you find the machine gun, and then you find the shotgun. I don't know if that's the order it is. You find all of your weapons throughout the course of the first half of the game, and then, but by the time the end of the first half is over, you are just like, you're so good at everything in this game. And as I was playing this, I was replaying this game for the podcast. I forgot. See, at the halfway point, you get captured and everything is taken from you.
I was just going to bring that up. I love that bit where you have to regain your weapons.
Yes, I agree.
It's pretty quick though. It doesn't drag that out, because you could easily think like, oh, I got to basically start again, and they could easily really drag it out. But they do a really good job of introducing you back to your weapons, and then introducing a bunch of other weapons on top, some of the more experimental weapons. I think once you're back to being fully kitted out, you end up with I think the next one you get is the bugs, which I forgot what they're called. Scrabs? No, wait, that's
Head crabs or
no,
No,
the
I know
ones
what
we
you're talking
throw.
yeah. I don't know what they're called.
Anyway, I think you get them, and that's quite a bit of a because I think you find them in a tank or something. Anyway, but yeah, it quickly gives you back your weapons, and you get that sensation of I'm back to full power now.
Yeah, but
You know?
here's the difference. I feel like I replayed Half-Life recently, and I already knew how the systems worked. But one thing I will never forget from the first time I played Half-Life 1 is how bad I was at the game at the very, very start. And then how good I was at the game halfway through it, and how every time that I got a new weapon after it was taken away from me, I was like, oh yeah, I know how to use this now. This is within my grasp, so I am totally empowered. It's great.
Do you know that I suddenly remembered when you said that you get better as you go. I seem to recall playing the game when I first encountered the HECU, the military rather, or the Marines, aren't they really? Anyway, it doesn't matter. When I first encountered them, I took what you could call the Doom approach, where you're just firing everything at them and waiting them to fall, and then you realise that is a fairly effective way, but you're going to get some damage, and it's not going to be the best way to go about it because you're going to be overwhelmed frequently. You're going to get flanked and stuff like that because they're not stupid. I mean, sometimes they do some weird things. I've seen the Half-Life AI do some kind of strange things, like run away to like just a little bit further down the corridor when I'm shooting them in the face, and they just go, I'm just going to run a few feet back so you can shoot me from a little bit further away, so it's just a bit strange. Anyway, so later on in the game, however, when I realized that there was Marines in the next room, I would think, can I maybe throw a grenade around the corner? Should I maybe peek around the corner and get them to run towards me and then drop a grenade there? It made me think more tactical.
And I think that would later help for like the development of things like we're going to talk about in a bit probably, but like offshoots like Counter-Strike and Team Fortress, which are definitely much more tactical games than games like Quake, which came before it.
But sorry, before you go, I just want to bring up one thing. I suddenly recalled one of the things that made me think this game is special. The intro sequence.
Right.
It's such a tiny thing, but I think it's really, really important because it's kind of pedestrian. You arrive on the tram, and you get given the welcome treatment from some pre-recorded audio, and you get to sort of explore the sort of explore the facility. You see things and stuff like that. You see a poor security guard who's like trapped in one of the tunnels. You see all these machines. You see a helicopter. You go outside. You go back inside. A bit of a roller coaster, really. But that whole sequence was so immersive. The way that just sort of said, you are this character. You are arriving, and we're not going to chuck you straight in. You're not going to like land in a room where someone's going to go, okay, right, like let's test your controls. Like look up to the ceiling, look down to the floor, and stuff like that. It says you're just a regular guy, and you're arriving at this test facility. And it even says like go, they say go put your suit on and stuff like that. You just feel like you're arriving for work in a way. And of course, like I say, I didn't know much about game design back then. Sure. I'm not going to claim that I'm an expert now, but I certainly know more nowadays. I think you do. But I was totally immersed from the first moment. and
I'm sure back in the
that,
day,
that I think is really special.
Good morning and welcome to the Black Mesa Transit System. This automated train is provided for the security and convenience of the Black Mesa Research Facility personnel. The time is 8:47 a.m. Current topside temperature is...
oh yeah, I bet. I'm sure back in the day, 1999, like this game, oh boy, it was at the top of the graphical league, right? I mean, like it was like 1998. Like, what do you think looks like the better game, Half-Life or Ocarina of Time?
Half-Life.
Wait, God dang it. Fine, Half-Life.
Half-Life
Even I
is.
can admit that much, even though I love Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's just graphically, Half-Life 1 is graphically more impressive, and well, it definitely hasn't held up.
But in Ocarina's defense, there's a lot more squeezed into that cartridge.
That's true. It's very, very true.
Yes, that's
There was a lot more space limitations. I think if they had if they release Ocarina on a PC, I would say it's potentially likely that
sure.
Ocarina would be the better looking game. But just comparing the two, I would have to go with Half-Life.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
So one more thing, I think that really, we kind of touched on the progression of Half-Life, right? And we talked about its level design, how it leads you through one natural level. But I think I want to also talk about how each section of that adventure is totally different from the last. Like, how you're playing a Mario game, right? And each level, it's totally separate. It totally, you're going from the sand level to the grass level to like the large level, but they're all separated, right? In Half-Life 1,
and you're all very distinct as well.
yes, in Half-Life 1, you're going from inside of a laboratory into like the sewers and the fans and the ventilation. You're hopping inside of like this massive test chamber with those three-headed aliens, right? Then you're going underground, swimming through this lake, going up inside this cage, and then you come out in the open. And now you're wandering on top of a cliff, on the side of a cliff. And now
I
there's
love
like
that
this...
sequence.
It's great. And
that
this
jet
is
flies by.
Yeah.
So cool.
And this is all in like the course of an hour, and you never once feel like one section is disconnected from the last one. And I think that that's something that's just so few games nail as much as the Half-Life series does.
I'll say this particularly special about Half-Life. Every game that I can think of outside of Half-Life, of all my favorite games, I can think of at least one area where I just think, oh, this bit again, or I got to do this now. I'm just trying to think of an example. Splinter Cell, I find the opening level a little bit boring because I've done it so many times.
Sure.
I could probably think of a better example, but that's just one. Half-Life, however, at no point. I mean, there are bits where I think, oh, this bit's really, really tricky. Like the one bit I always find I get a bit stuck is surface tension,
Right.
where you're running across sand. There's head crabs. There's also mines which are undetectable.
Yeah.
And there's also a blimmin' Apache going at you, which I end up just shooting down. Just spending time in a cave, waiting for it to fly past, so it's got its back to me, peeking out, shooting it, and then ducking for cover again, because it is actually quite hard to get by it. Because you've got to run for a manhole, haven't you? But yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought now. Where was I going with this? I do this all the time.
You're talking about surface tension. You're talking about how there's this one
yes,
aspect.
yes.
Yeah.
There's never this part of Half-Life where you think, oh, this bit's probably going to stress me out because it's really, really hard. This is rage quit area. But there's never a part of Half-Life where I think, oh, this bit's so boring. Every time I play it, also it's always one part where I think, oh, I remember this, because there's so many moments where there's little things, like for example, there's one bit where you go into when you are activating the jet engine to kill the three-headed creature. When you that whole area, when you go into that big sort of chamber, and there's like a pit of ooze or toxic waste, I think. Is it toxic? I don't think it is toxic. Either way, it's flooded. And it's just big. And, you go, like you said earlier, you go from like big areas to tiny areas to
Right.
Completely different areas, to sand areas, to grass areas, to underground. And then, like, this one here, like the tram, for example, not the tram, not the
Yes.
beginning tram, the one that you're controlling.
The minecart, yeah.
Yeah, which is a bit
Basically.
strange because the controls. I mean,
I think they
so
work.
I mean, it's good, but one thing I always thought that was quite weird about that is, so if someone was riding this tram, this cart as an employee, would they be shooting those turning signs as well,
It's a good
or do they
point.
hit them with their hands? Because
You
there
gotta
doesn't seem to
shoot
be any other
something, right?
controls.
You got to shoot something, right? I mean,
It's fun though, isn't it? I would try and hit them from as far as possible. It was like a shooting range. It was,
it was pretty
but that whole sequence is excellent too. It's something completely different. I can't think of a game before that where you're riding a tram and you got to shoot the controls to make the tram go in the right direction. And it's a bit maze-like, but it's not too confusing.
Yeah. It's truly incredible. I think that it speaks to how many different areas there are in Half-Life, how they flow seamlessly in and out of each other, and how not really a single one of them is bad per se, except one that I can possibly think of. And
okay,
I would like to kind of move forward in the progression of Half-Life. So you're moving around throughout the Black Mesa Research Facility. You get to the Lambda complex. You're teaming up with your science buddies there, right? Your scientists who they're just trying to survive. They're just trying not to get killed by these soldiers that have come in to hunt them. By the way, I just want to say real quick, I don't like the what are they called? Not fetch quests, but escort missions. Those wait a minute, escort.
Oh, when you got to basically
lead the scientists.
Yeah,
that's one thing I don't like.
I think escort missions in general are annoying.
Yeah.
Some are done well. Resident Evil 4, I think, did a very good job of it.
Later, when we get to Half-Life 2, I want to talk about an escort mission that I do really, really like. But in Half-Life 1, nah, I don't like those. Regardless, that's not my point. After you do that, you make your way into like the very, very core of the Lambda complex. And Barney Calhoun, I believe, and another scientist, I'm assuming this is going to be... what's his name from Half-Life 2? It starts with a K.
Kleiner.
Yeah, that's right.
I know.
They're sitting there at the center, and they tell you, hey, we need you to go through this portal to the other side, into this other dimension, essentially.
Yes, of course.
And go to Zen. And from that moment on, you enter what is probably the most controversial section of Half-Life 1. David, how do you feel about...
No, absolutely the most controversial.
How do you feel about XEN Zen?
I think what people don't like about Zen is that it's basically a platforming section.
Yeah. Platforming is probably the weakest part of Half-Life for sure.
Any first-person shooter, really. There's very few first-person shooters that do a very good job of it. But personally, I actually quite like Zen. I think it's a bit of I wouldn't even say it's an anticlimax. I just think it's quite an abrupt ending. Because what I didn't particularly like was I didn't know what I was fighting. I feel like it could have been a bit more setup. I feel like I could have encountered a scientist who said, did they actually say anything? I can't recall. Because there's not much dialogue in Half-Life. That's one of the things I think Half-Life 2 does better, is that there's more dialogue. Mm-hmm. There's more story told through dialogue.
Sure.
Whereas in Half-Life 1, basically just like stuff goes down. Things go wrong.
Right.
Anyway, I think when I encountered the Nihilanthe or Nihilanth, whatever, which means basically a creature that doesn't care. That's what a nihilist is, isn't it? Someone who just doesn't care about anything. So I'm not sure what that was implying about Nihilanthe and what that means.
Well, actually, thing about the Nihilanthe, it's the protector of the Vortigans, if I remember correctly. The Vortigans pretty much seek Nihilanthe out in hopes of it to protect them from the Combine, even though it's the last of its species. There were 3, if I remember correctly, 3 that survived the Combine, and that was one of the last ones.
And Gordon went and killed it.
Yeah.
but what I don't like about that sequence is I didn't know what was going on, because you fight what's the giant head crab called? Go into G. Golanth? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Anyway, you fight the head crab laying mother head crab, I guess, and that felt kind of like a final boss fight. I remember thinking, this is a bit, for the want of a better way to put it. It was pretty underwhelming. And then I was fighting Nihalanth, but I didn't know who it was, or who he was, or what he was doing. And then once I managed to kill that, it was over. And I like the way the game ends as well. Have you gone the bad way as well? You selected the bad option.
Bad option is pretty intimidating for sure.
Yeah, the bad option's actually quite funny in a way. Not intentionally, but it's like kind of like, oh, okay. But when I was fighting Nihalanth, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know why I needed to kill it.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel that could have been set up as if to say, like, right, this is the final battle. You're going to go in there now. There's going to be this giant beast is called Nihalanth, and you need to destroy it. Otherwise,
Sure.
we're done.
Sure. I'm kind of a similar mindset to you. Backtracking a bit, I think the area of Zen itself, it's kind of split up into two parts, right? You have the initial section that's kind of like you say, this platforming section where you're jumping down onto this floating island. You fight this one monster on 4 legs, and then you jump back up those platforms into this teleporter. That section is not great, in my opinion, because, like you say, Half-Life is not good at platforming, and that section is almost entirely dedicated to platforming. But
yeah, there's very few moments in Half-Life where you do have to jump across gaps and stuff like
Right.
that, but sometimes they're optional. Or they're kind of opposite, or they're just moments, like where the floor gives out or something like that. Or you're jumping over, I don't know, electrified water or a laser. There's a bunch of sections, of course, where there's mines and stuff, like motion detectors, where you've got to kind of jump over them. That's all done pretty well. But I think when you are doing nothing but that, the first-person view is never good for jumping.
Mm-hmm.
In a game, because you don't have the control you normally would in real life, of course. So it's always going to feel unrealistic and just annoying and hard to judge and stuff like that.
Putting that aside, though, I think once you go through that teleporter and you get past that section, there's another part of Zen that's kind of overlooked, where you go through this factory area, which I think is really, really cool. It feels a lot like, I think
it's cool, yeah.
Yeah, it feels a lot like you're sneaking into this base, you're sneaking into this plant, kind of like, I don't know, like sneaking into the Shinra Corporation in Final Fantasy VII.
I got the feeling like as if, and I'm pretty sure I thought this when I first played. I got the sensation, or I was reminded of sequences in probably a good couple of films that I've seen.
Right, me too.
Where a human hero or whatever is sneaking aboard an alien ship.
Yeah.
And he's witnessing the alien ship preparing to attack Earth. Because there are moments where they're basically producing those what do they call them? Kind of like Titans, aren't they? I'm sure they've got a bizarre name. The ones that fire wasps at you in a way, aren't they? I forgot what they call them. Big ugly things.
Yeah.
Big square thing. They're basically producing them.
Yeah.
And I know that's generally the goal. They are actually doing that. They are preparing to take over another dimension. So yeah, I think that entire section is absolutely fine.
That's the better half.
I just think it could have had more story. I mean, if you look at I know might go on to this later on. If you look at the expansions, other characters go there. Barney goes to Zen. What's her name?
Alex.
No, yeah, but also from Decay. No, was it opposing force?
I'm not
It's
sure.
another character, the female character. I think it's Decay, because I think Decay is a co-op game, isn't it? I can't recall.
Probably.
Anyway, there's another character that goes there, so there were opportunities to have a nice little crossover. Granted, I imagine they would have decided to send these other characters to Zen well after Half-Life was made, and they would have only been able to do that if they really thought that far ahead, which they probably weren't going to do. But still, they could have easily just dropped a couple of characters in this, somehow, I don't know, or there could have been some way that an alien or even a Vortigaunt could have spoke with Gordon in some way. I don't know. I just feel like Zen was a decent climax, but it needed some exposition to make it feel like a climax.
Hey,
but overall, I think as that platforming section aside, the Gonark, I think it's called, isn't it? The platforming section apart fighting the monster that begins with G. That part, is a bit frustrating.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I think it's perfectly fine. But my problem with beyond that is just that it could have done with a bit more story.
I think I couldn't agree with you more there, honestly. Except for whenever you finally fight Nihilant, that boss fight took me about 40 minutes to complete, to be honest, and it
is quite tough.
It's pretty anticlimactic, like you say, in my opinion. There's nothing too great about Nihilant.
Yeah, he sparks some lightning from somewhere and then he blows up.
That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. What isn't anticlimactic is whenever you finally beat the game, you've beaten Nihilant, however you pronounce it, and you are encountered for the very first time, face on anyway, by the G-Man.
The G-Man.
Oh, I always forget the areas where you spot him.
Yeah.
I think there's like 4.
There's quite a few.
But I always think like there could be more. But he always surprises me. I love the one in the office complex where he just walks up to the door, shakes, plays with his tie, and then walks off.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he's because he can't see Gordon or something, or whether he's just being obnoxious. Just being like, "Oh, hey, Gordon, how's things? I'm just going to sort my tie out here. See ya."
Yeah. Up until this moment,
he's walking along the balcony.
Yeah, for sure. The G-Man, if you aren't paying attention, you could very much miss that the G-Man, a man in a blue suit with a dorky red tie, has been watching you throughout the entire game. But
is bulletproof.
Basically, yeah.
You can control time.
Yes, basically. So you encounter him at the end of the game, and he hires you into his services, or not, depending on if you want to be destroyed by an army.
Hiring is a strong word.
Yeah,
lenient.
Yeah, a little too.
He does a very good job of making it sound like he's signing you up for a duty, but really he's kind of threatening you. He's saying like, if you don't do it, there's other options, but you won't like them.
So after intimidating you in such a way, you're hired into his service and put into cryostasis for the next 20 years or 4 years, depending on whether you want to talk about in-game Half-Life time or real-world time, until the events of Half-Life 2. And that's Half-Life. That is Half-Life, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great game. It's got I think, not a particularly fantastic story, but in the words of some famous person that I'm forgetting, presentation a lot of the times can be better than story. And I think that's what Half-Life nails essentially incredibly well. One of the greatest games ever made, easily.
Could not come more highly recommended from me. Just going back to what I said earlier about being indecisive of what my number one game of all time is.
Right.
I mean, I'm uncertain of whether I would call it my favorite game of all time, but I will call it my favorite first-person shooter of all time by a vast margin.
I will totally understand that one. Joel, you haven't played it too much, but do you have any concluding thoughts on Half-Life before we move on to another topic?
Not really, no.
That's understandable. Well, after Half-Life came out, it was kind of a big deal, I would say. Kind of like a massive big deal. Like a really, really big deal. Half-Life evolved the first-person shooter as we know it. It began like where Doom initiated things, where Doom is like the Super Mario Bros. Of the FPS genre.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I like
Half-Life is the Super Mario World of the FPS genre.
You know, I heard something once. I think it was on another podcast where they said that you can easily you can define, you can demonstrate how important and how impactful Half-Life was by arranging all first-person shooters into categories of pre-Half-Life and post-Half-Life.
Oh wow.
Pre-Half-Life is Doom, post-Half-Life is Halo. Because obviously Halo does the whole cinematic thing too.
Yeah, absolutely.
While there are FMV sequence from the third person, there is a lot of cinematic real what do they call them? What's the word? Like when a scene. Not quite. When a scene unfolds before you, rather than it be an FMV.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So like just like a cinematic sequence, you know.
Sure.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that in Halo. And of course, another example, interestingly, would be Doom 3, where they kind of went really into the story, probably a bit too much, a lot of reading happening. Nobody really wanted to do that, but I'm the kind of person who would try and read everything in a game because I'm weird like that. And so Doom 3 is fine, but Doom 3 is a post-Half-Life game. OG Doom is a pre-Half-Life game, and you can definitely tell the difference between the two.
Oh, for sure.
That's how important it was. It is certainly the most important first-person shooter.
Oh, for sure. One of the most important video games, for sure. And out of Half-Life sprang this really impressive modding community that made such classics as Counter-Strike, which went on to form one of the most competitive esports games in history. As well as Team Fortress, which went on to, I don't know if the original Team Fortress is too well liked by today's standards, but I know it went on to make TF2, which is also very highly acclaimed. But also out of the original Half-Life, still played to this day. Yeah, even after Overwatch came out, which I'm a little more inclined
And then
to.
don't forget Gmod. Hey.
Yeah, well, we'll come to Gmod a bit later. That's more related to Half-Life 2. Regardless, what else also came out of Half-Life was a couple expansions that I think David is a bit more familiar with than I am.
You would be wrong.
Oh, I would be wrong. Oh, okay. Well,
I just know a little bit of the lore that involves games, and that's just primarily the fact that the characters also went to Zen.
Sure.
Barry Calhoun and I can't remember the lady's name.
We'll talk about it for a minute. I don't think any of us have played Opposing Force or Blue Shift, but
I really want to.
Me
no,
too.
I have not played it, but I do know some important details that do happen in them.
Really
cool.
Explain it.
Okay, for example, in Opposing Force, there's a point where you know the bomb that that blows up Black Mesa.
Well, wait a second. Can you explain to us what Half-Life Opposing Force is, real quick, sir?
It's I got no idea. All I know is that there's
Oh,
details.
sure. Well, I'll explain it real quick. Half-Life Opposing.
Basically, playing on the other team, right?
Yes, that's basically a Half-Life Opposing Force came
Is
out.
it? Oh, okay.
Yes, it came out a year after the original Half-Life, made by Gearbox Software,
So
not
that's
actually
why it's called
not actually by Valve itself. And basically, yeah, you're playing as one of the members from the Hazardous Environment Combat Unit, or HECU, as David likes to call them, against Gordon Freeman.
Yes.
So it was this really cool idea of, you're playing kind of the villain now from Half-Life 1.
Oh, you actually are fighting against Gordon.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I like that idea a lot. I like it a lot.
I kind of thought it would be more like they would talk about him and talk about encountering him, and it'd be kind of like this is not. I think I could probably come up with a better example here, but it's kind of like the SAX entity in Metroid Fusion,
When
where you kind of just see it occasionally, and then he becomes the final boss, maybe.
That's so cool.
When the final boss is a nerd with a crowbar. Oh dear lord, humanity.
Sure.
That would be such a great way for Gordon to win a fight.
Hey,
like he's fighting an enemy and throwing everything at them, and then he just like hits them with a crowbar. Straight in the head.
2 years after that was Half-Life Blue Shift, where you play as Barney Calhoun, who's one of the notable characters from Half-Life 1. Kind of notable, actually. It doesn't seem like he was particularly emphasized in Half-Life 1. You don't actually really learn his name. But regardless, you get to play as him in Half-Life Blue Shift. Neither of these two games are as well liked as the original. I think Blue Shift is probably the least liked of the three.
I think it's got something like a 60 or a 70 on Metacritic or something like that.
Yeah, it's not too well remembered, but regardless, it's part of the Half-Life.
It's part of the Half-Life story, so I'm game.
Yes. Yep, there it is. There you have it. And
Okay.
that's pretty much the story of Half-Life 1, ladies and gentlemen. It went on, it created a legacy. Like David says, every first-person shooter to come out after it was basically inspired by Half-Life. But, wait, math. 6 years later, Valve, they wanted to up the ante. They wanted to...
See, it feels like so much longer.
Yeah, I know, right? It was basically, I mean, 6 years of video game time. Like, that's that basically is like a lifetime. Regardless, Valve wanted to up the ante, right? Wanted to go on. They wanted to increase their legacy. Already, Half-Life 1 by 2004 was starting to look a little outdated. Not gameplay wise, but graphically. And so Valve, they went on to make Half-Life 2. A little bit of backstory on Half-Life 2's development firsthand. Did you guys know that almost the entirety of a beta of Half-Life 2's source code was leaked before it came out?
Oh, yes, I do know that story. I remember reading about and
No,
how
I
they
don't
nabbed
know.
him as well.
Yes, that is right.
On
The hacker,
nabbed
right?
him?
Oh, it was. They managed to get him. Yeah, if I recall. Should I
So-
jump on it?
Yeah,
Should I
yeah,
say it?
sure, go for it. Yeah.
Okay, so if I recall, you might be you might have the information more
I
accurate
do.
than I, but I'll just go. I'll try it. So there was a hacker who managed to hack into Valve's internal systems, and he managed to grab a beta copy of Half-Life 2 and threw it out on the web. Not long after that, rather, he complimented Valve on their work, and I'm not sure if it was Gabe Newell himself or someone else. They contacted him, and they basically said that they were very impressed with his work, and they wanted to give him a job.
Yeah.
And they invited him to the Valve offices, and of course
And
there
they
was no
arrested
job
him.
waiting. They were cops.
Yeah, that's right. That is absolutely correct. Basically, yeah, that's you basically got the entire story right there. Axel Gembe is his name. He was a
Was that his real name?
yes.
A
yes, sir.
Gambit.
Yeah. Axel Gembe. That's correct.
Oh, Gembe. Okay, I think it's a Gambit. Right,
Nope.
okay.
He's from Germany. He's still around today. Seems like a really naive guy, actually. Like a decent guy.
Oh yeah.
No.
I mean, come on. We'll give you a job. Come to the office. It's not a trap. It's not a trap. Come to the office. We're going to give you a job working with the company that made that game you love. And
Yeah, for sure. He was an experienced hacker from Germany. Yeah, and like you say, he hacked into Valve's network. According to Gembe himself, he didn't actually upload the files to the web. He gave it to a friend in good confidence, and the friend broke that confidence and uploaded the entire thing. For a while, Valve had absolutely no idea who hacked their system, but Axel apparently felt, I don't know if he felt bad about it or not. He would have escaped totally unharmed, but he approached Valve himself. He emailed Gabe Newell himself, providing evidence saying, "Hey, yeah, I was the one who stole this from you guys. Could I have a job at your studio?" And well, they jumped on it pretty quickly. The FBI.
bless him.
Yeah, but yeah. So lo and behold, one day in his bedroom, the FBI showed up. They were like, "Hey, kid, we're taking you," and he was totally fine. Like he originally he was going to get a 2-year sentence because he submitted completely, and he didn't even try to defend himself. He was just like, I did this. He really didn't get much of a sentence, and he's still around today.
Did they manage to get an idea of how much money he could have potentially cost Valve? Because when you think about it, I mean, if that beta was near complete, it could have easily been fixed in a way. It could have been anyone could have filled in the holes and put the game out there fully.
Yeah, they expected that he might have costed them around $250 million. Expected.
What?
Yes.
Wow.
But the
That's
thing
a
about it
lot.
was he leaked
Poor
it onto
Bill.
the internet, and again, remember this was a beta, but it wasn't particularly impressive. And since the internet likes to jump to conclusions. People weren't too hot on Half-Life 2. They were like, is this really going to be a great game? Obviously, how about, I'm just going to dive into it right now. In the long run, Axel Ganbei did not affect Half-Life 2 at all. Not one bit. It was initially revealed in 2003. I want to say 83, where it got Game of the Show by a number of places. The whole Axel Ganbei hacking Valve thing happened, but then it released in 2004, and I would say it probably blew everyone off the map just as much as the original Half-Life did.
It blew me away in that I just thought, do you know what, this I think is as good as the first.
Yeah.
I almost didn't want to believe it in a way because I had so much love for the original Half-Life. It was like my I don't want to say my childhood game. It was the game that I truly fell in love with, and so then came Half-Life 2, and I kind of, it's a bit silly, but I almost wanted to kind of dislike it, say like, it's good, but it's more of a B to Half-Life's A, you know, it's very good, but it's no Half-Life. But I would put it almost on the same level. The Half-Life 1 is special because of the way I was introduced to it. So for me, it's just, I hold it above Half-Life 2 solely for that reason. Gameplay wise and everything else, it's on the same level. In fact, I did look it up on Metacritic out of curiosity to find out how they grade, and they're exactly the same.
Wow, that's
according
crazy.
to Metacritic, 91% or 91 out of 100 or whatever, they are scored exactly.
Let's dig into what makes Half-Life 2 so special. First of all, I want to, from the events of the previous game, Gordon Freeman, he's put into cryostasis for 20 years, right? In that span of time, Joel, what happens? What happens to the world of Half-Life?
All right, we're gonna.
Oh, he's prepared for this. Here we go.
We're gonna go back to opposing forces first, because there's a small Easter egg that you find there, that you yourself was the one that stopped the bomb at Black Mesa. So, just a quick note: what happens at Black Mesa is that they blow it up, and this explosion catches the interest of an alien species called the Combine, which they're basically so powerful. They are interdimensional traveling species that the Nylanth and the Vodicons fled from their old planet and found their way to Zen because of the Combine. So from what I get, the Combine don't actually have the technology to create portals and stuff like that. But what they do is they get other species to do it for them, which is why after 20 years you see that they assimilated human DNA and sort of merged with it to create their own soldiers. So that's the common Combine army that you see, the main bad guy in Half-Life 2.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, but the explosion...
Yeah, I got the vibe that they weren't human, definitely.
Yeah, so the Black Mesa, when it exploded, in opposing forces, you actually stop the bomb. You turn it off. But you see that the G-Man is the one who turns it on again.
That's interesting.
So the G-Man is the one that actually caused the explosion to attract the Combine. We don't know why, but he did. Or at least we assume that he knew that the Combine would be attracted to the explosion.
We don't know a lot about the G-Man's intentions, but we'll get more into that a bit later.
I think that's what makes him so special.
Yeah, for sure. But please continue. What? So then Half-Life 2 comes around. Gordon wakes up. G-Man wakes Gordon up, right?
And it's been 20 years after the Combine have taken over Earth. And so basically, what's the administrator's name again?
Wallace Breen.
Breen?
Yes.
Breen. Yep.
Breen,
Wallace Breen is the spokesperson between the Combine and the humans, and pretty much the humans are enslaved.
Yeah.
By the Combine. So yeah.
Wallace Breen, who was the former administrator of the Black Mesa Research Facility, he chickens out. He becomes
surrenders.
Yeah, he surrenders for the whole of humanity. He's the one
that officially surrenders. Yes. Yep. Yeah.
That's correct. And as a result of that, they put him in charge of the entire human race, and I think that power kind of goes to his head. Is that safe to assume?
He just kind of put himself up on a pedestal as a kind of like a deity almost. Like
Yep.
he's got his speeches and stuff like that.
Actually, that's true. Because I remember, he didn't seem like someone who valued the human race more. Like if I remember correctly, because this is from my experience, I played it yesterday. The part where you teleport in the portal and it goes haywire, and you teleport a bit into his office. He
we'll talk
bloody
about that in a
dobs
minute.
on you.
Yeah.
The little brat. He's like a brat. He dobs on you to the
Yeah.
That's true. That is true. So essentially, you as Gordon Freeman wake up in the same way that you start off in Half-Life 1 on a train, and you get off the train and you get onto the train station, but you find you don't arrive at your job this time. You arrive.
Do you think that was done on purpose? It was kind of like almost like it's happened again in a way, but not quite the way. This is something else. You know, This is something bigger.
Oh yeah.
Much bigger. Can I just say, by the way, one of my favorite lines in video game history is uttered by G-Man, where he does it so sinister. He just says, the way he says, wake up and smell the ashes, is so sinister. He's sinister all around, but the whole speech is brilliant.
Yeah.
One of my favorite sequences. And going back to what I said about the intro of Half-Life 1, that intro to Half-Life 2 was equally memorable for that dialogue from G-Man, just the way he talks, and that hissy, sneaky whisper that he kind of has to his voice, and just the way the word ashes kind of is perfect for him to say it, because he is the character who can make the word ashes sound really sinister.
Well, the right man in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world.
Yes,
Rise and shine, Mr. Freeman. Rise and shine. Not that I wish to imply you have been sleeping on the job. No one is more deserving of a rest, and all the effort in the world would have gone to waste until... well, let's just say your hour has come again. The right man in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world. So wake up, Mr. Freeman. Wake up and smell the ashes.
Wake up, Mr. Freeman.
I don't think the G-Man is human.
No.
No, I can definitely say that.
We'll get more into conspiracies about G-Man later once we get after Half-Life 2 a bit. So you wake up, you're wandering the city of City 17, right?
Actually, can I just quickly interrupt for a sec?
Sure, yeah, real quick.
Yeah, I actually did you ever talk to the guys on the train?
Oh, I didn't.
A couple of times.
Yeah.
I think I recall something about a guy who said that he was stuck there, if I recall.
It was actually so funny, because you know how there's only one carriage, right? It's a one-carriage train, pretty much, like a tram.
Yeah.
Yeah. You go up to the first guy, and the guy is literally turns to you and goes, "Oh, I didn't know you were in." Yeah, I didn't see you there. I'm like, there was two people originally. I'm the third person. Hello, I just appeared there. How did you not see that?
That's awesome. I never noticed that. That's so cool. Well, regardless, I'm gonna kind of breeze through the first part of Half-Life 2, but you wake up to the City 17, which is just a kind of communistic monstrosity of a city that's taken over by the Combine. People are in shambles, as in typical Half-Life fashion. It naturally leads you throughout the course of the city. You see the oppression here and how people are treated like dirt. Eventually,
it's like 1984.
Yes, it is a lot like 1984. I would say, and as you kind of you continue through that city, you eventually find Alex Vance, who takes you down underneath into the secret lair with Barney Calhoun, what's his name, Kleiner, Dr. Kleiner, and
actually,
yes,
it was Barney that finds you first.
That's true. I'm sorry. Yeah, Barney Calhoun.
Oh yeah,
he saves you from the Combine.
Yeah,
and then takes you to what's it called? Wait,
well, it's a torture room, basically, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh no, it was. Oh yeah. Sorry. Barney saves him from the Combine, right? Gets him out, and then you run, and then you meet Alex, who saves you from getting beaten up by the Combine.
That's right. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I'm
That
sorry
was
about
it,
that.
yeah.
So you're all trying to teleport out of the city in order to get to this, what would you call it, a laboratory on the outskirts. And Alex Vance makes it through no problem.
Yeah.
Gordon, you as Gordon are about to go through, teleport to find Eli Vance, who you left behind in the first game. Whenever Dr. Kleiner's pet head crab screws everything up entirely, you alert every single Combine soldier, the entire city, that Gordon Freeman is alive and he's a threat. And by teleporting directly onto Wallace Breen's living room, essentially.
And then he dobs on you. I don't think the Combine would have realized, but he was bloody dobbed on by Brain.
But
Like, he betrays humanity right then.
that's true. But so yeah, you're teleported outside of the secret laboratory, and for the entire rest of the game, you are on the run. Barney Calhoun passes you your crowbar, and you got to make your way through the city. And from that moment,
The talisman is like you gotta go back into war. Here's your staff. Here is your. This is it's symbolic in a way because it says like it's time to go again. Here's your crowbar.
Yeah.
It's become such an icon of the game.
Victory. Here's a crowbar.
And from that moment,
can you imagine just like important historical figures?
Yeah.
Like Napoleon won his wars because he went charging into battle with a crowbar in hand.
Right now in City 17 there's a statue of Gordon with holding a crowbar above him.
So from that moment on, you are on the run, and you are running through City 17. So yeah, you start off with the crowbar. You eventually get in that traditional Half-Life loop, the weapon progression, right? You make your way, you get the crowbar. You're pretty defenseless, but then you get the pistol from Combine Soldier in a back alley way. You keep on making your way through. You get the machine gun and the shotgun. Yeah. So I guess we're kind of getting into Half-Life 2's gameplay loop here. David, what separates Half-Life 2 from Half-Life 1, you think?
I was just thinking that, and I think apart from the visuals being obviously far superior,
yeah, sure.
I think I'm going to be honest here, and I'm going to say that the actual shooting, the actual first-person shooter gameplay, I think, is a little bit better. I think the weapons feel really powerful. They feel like when you're firing the handgun and when you first get that and you're raining down bullets on the Combine, the gun feels. Even as a handgun, it feels really powerful, like a real handgun would be.
I think the Combine actually.
I think generally the weapons. sorry. I think generally the weapons are and the shooting is what for me separates Half-Life 1 and 2. And also I think the dialogue and the story is a bit more full, a bit more well developed.
Sure.
Yeah, from the way you guys describe Half-Life 1, I see Half-Life 2 as a much better narrative.
Sure.
Like you guys explained,
I think starting with Half-Life 2 is for you going to make Half-Life 1 not look as good. I think, you could argue either way, but I think starting with Half-Life 2 is not a good idea. I'm not saying you've done something wrong. I'm just saying I'm folding my arms and disappointed or anything. I'm saying that I think now what you've done is you've played Half-Life 2 and you've had that experience. When you get a Half-Life 1 now, I think it's gonna be not as impactful as Half-Life 1 was on me as it would be. Or it's going to be less impactful on you, I think, because it's going to feel like a lesser game.
Oh, well,
I think.
Nah, if it's fun, I'll play it.
But you will still enjoy it. You will still enjoy it. But I think at the end of this, Half-Life 2, I guarantee Half-Life 2 will be your favorite of the two.
So, in a way, I think that Half-Life 2 and 1 are very, very similar. On one front, I was talking earlier, the linear progression. Like, Half-Life 2 is, again, just a single long, straightforward level that is interconnected by a bunch of fluent areas that you, in the course of 3 or 4 or 5 hours, you're in a post-apocalyptic city. Basically, you go onto a riverboat, and then you go into a scientific laboratory, into a real post-apocalyptic town. And then you're driving a race car, and then
actually, sorry, keep going.
no. What were you gonna say, Joel?
I found that out as well. Like there were a lot of parts where I felt like I was going off track in an open world, but it ended up being the right path.
Right.
Even though it was so strange. It's like it's like I chose the best path, like a good hiding place to run through or something like that, right? But it turns out to be the exact same path. It's like because in like you guys said, it's very linear and very forcefully structured for you to go from point A to point B. It's not open world at all.
Yeah.
I'm still amazed by how they actually made it seem like it was very open world, like because I decided to go in that particular direction, not the game, and yet I was. It's obviously the right way.
I think it's because some areas are so big that it seems like you could potentially get lost. And really, it's actually just one very open, gigantic pathway.
Absolutely. And this is a different. It's similar to Half-Life 1 in that respect, but this is a different time than Half-Life 1, right? 6 years later, after Grand Theft Auto 3 came out. So open world games were on the forefront of everyone's minds, yet Half-Life 2 swoops in and does linear progression just as great as the first Half-Life does. And I think that is absolutely incredible. So yeah, you make your way out of City 17, and you get to Joel's favorite part of the game, the riverboat.
I can make it better. Just if I find the singing Vortigaunt.
I know about it, yeah. But what Ethan's referencing is basically I played it yesterday and I rage quitted at
That's
at
an
the
understatement. Yeah, that's an understatement.
Okay,
Rage
I
quitting.
had a huge rant in the Discord chat.
I did get the impression that you were raging, definitely.
Basically, I got through the majority of it, right? Even though the raft mechanics were absolutely awful and terrible.
I think
I hated it. I found up to that point, I found the game to be really well thought out. I thought it was perfectly fine. The mechanics were fine. The gameplay was fine. The graphics was fine. The narrative was perfect. And then the raft just made me wanted to bang my head in. I got up near to the end of it, right, to the part where I think it was a part where you had to go through you have to go through this like under passageway where there's two tanks shooting at you,
Right.
and you go up this ramp and fly into an open tunnel. And the thing is, so I destroyed both tanks because they were really triggering me. And then I spent about 15 minutes trying to go to launch off this ramp and into the tunnel, but I'm always off by the slightest margin, just crashing into the side, and I never make it. So I spent 15 minutes unable to do it because of the raft mechanics. I swear it's the raft mechanics, because I can play driving games.
I'm trying to think of what section this is. Is this the one where there's a tank on a bridge? No, wait, that's going. No, you just go straight through there. Because there's a couple of segments where I think are a little bit tricky, where you are basically riding along the top of pipes.
Okay, so it's the part where you actually there's an under passageway where you go through.
Before or after the gun?
After the gun, because I shot the tanks. I did say that. It's definitely after the gun.
Okay.
It's okay, so there's like a bunch of I think it's like a metal in the middle, metal ships that don't do anything, I don't think. And there's an under passageway that you kind of have to go through that's blocked off by like wooden pillars, and you have to go through underneath there, out, and then through the tunnel, and then you. Sorry, I'm bad at describing. And
That's fine.
either way, there's two tanks on top of the concrete walls, like
Well-
shooting down at you. So you can't actually get up on them.
Oh,
And
I
it's
think
a
I
pain in the
know.
ass to aim.
I think I know what you're talking about. I will agree. The first time I played through this game, I think the boat section might just be the weakest section of Half-Life 2.
Yeah, I think what frustrated me more was that I found the game so easy until then, as well.
Yeah.
I did not die a single time until that specific moment.
I think a lot of times in Half-Life 2, I was close to death, but managed to pull through. And I wonder sometimes if that was done on purpose. I don't know if this was a part of the mechanics, and I kind of doubt it. I'm going to say probably not, but it really felt like the game was perfectly balanced, because the amount of times I was down to a couple of shots and I'm dead,
Right.
and I managed to pull through and take on about 10 combine without getting hit. The amount of times that happened, especially in the end, I know you get like the overpowered sort of gravity gun, but still, that whole sequence, you're being it combine everywhere. You do, especially on hard, you do get kind of like knocked down to only a few points of health. But going back to the boat section, I think the only part I find frustrating, I'm still trying to figure out what Joel was referring to, because I can't quite picture it.
Right.
But I wonder. That's interesting, because I feel like I would have encountered the same problem, so I'm not sure what. Anyway, I'm wondering like if it's like a different version of the game you're playing, maybe, or something. Anyway, I doubt it. But still.
I think we should move past the boating section a bit. I think it's a bit difficult, but push through.
I just want to say the one bit that I particularly found rage inducing was the jump through the dam.
Oh right.
Sometimes I'll nail it straight away. Other times, for some reason, no matter what I do, I will hit the edge, or I'll just not make it.
Well, regardless of how you feel about the boating section of Half-Life 2, there's a good reason to push through, and that is for what is probably one of the greatest weapons in video game history, the gravity
gun.
So,
so good.
Valve, they made an entirely new engine for this game called the Source Engine, which they would go on to later use in pretty much all of their 3D games like Portal, Left 4 Dead, Counter-Strike. But this game right here, Half-Life 2, was kind of it was a demo. It was a tech demo to show off what kind of physics the Source Engine was capable of, and at the center of that tech demo was the gravity gun. Understand here, physics in video games before this were not particularly special, right? I mean, you had like your predefined motion paths. You had kind of your...
Oh, yeah, there was no math going on. It was like kind of like an estimation of...
Physics in Half-Life 1, moving boxes around in Half-Life 1 is just awful. It's awful trying to move or slide across like a water-laden corridor. In Half-Life 2, the gravity gun proves that the Source Engine truly was something way ahead of its time. The gravity gun is just awesome to hold, man. It's just great because you could pull in anything, whether it be a TNT barrel or a buzzsaw from way far away, bring it towards you and shoot it off at like 25 miles an hour. It's great.
You can kill people with a toilet.
It's great. What else do you possibly want in life? I will say about the gravity gun, I didn't find as many chances to use it as I would have liked throughout the game. I think that whenever you use a TNT barrel... I
think that's good, though.
It probably is a good thing, I would imagine.
You don't want to spam the same weapon over and over again. You want to kind of have your main.
Sure.
Some people prefer the shotgun, some people prefer something a bit more automatic. I think you want your gravity gun as a kind of situational weapon.
Sure.
Where maybe you don't have much ammo and you're going to have to use your environment. I think they probably did that on purpose.
Sure, that makes perfect sense to me. But yeah, gravity gun, Joel, you didn't get to that part, unfortunately, but it's really fantastic.
he will get to that point. He's going to plow through.
You better do
and
it. You better
after
do
several occasions of rage quitting, I'm you're gonna have to send me a screenshot of this section because I'm really trying to figure it out. Is it like an S, like a platform in an S shape
No.
made of wood? Because that bit was a bit annoying. Okay.
Well,
Never mind.
after
Let's carry on.
the gravity gun, there's quite a bit left of the game. I think we kind of gotta speed through the rest of the podcast a little bit here because we don't have a ton of time left. But
Cool.
yeah, after the gravity gun, you just like I say in typical Half-Life fashion, you just go through so many different environments in this game. I mean, you go to Ravenholm, which is this.
Oh, I love that section.
That is a crazy.
Now that's a bit where
section.
you really get to use the gravity gun.
Oh yeah, that is probably the main gravity guns heavy section where there's just these.
It is for me a nod back to probably their original goal of creating a horror game.
Probably.
Because it genuinely is. It contrasts the rest of the game. It contrasts against the rest of the game so much. You could easily say that it was a bit out of place, but they set it up so well. It's only a small scene where Alex says we don't go there anymore and stuff like that. It's really cool. And then of course you go there, and you got the lighting. It's a really good job of using silhouettes because the amount of times those speedy, I don't know what they are, children head crabs creatures, children zombies, so they're quicker. When they're climbing up pipes and stuff like that, you see them in the distance, and you see them contrasting against, like, they're genuinely creepy. And then you've got the poison head crabs, which are also creepy. They're almost spider-like, so that's going to really upset some arachnophobes. They're kind of like a scorpion version of the head crab. And they're not too troublesome, but they do, when they hit you, they knock your health points down to 1. And they really put you on the spot. They really make you nervous because you think they're not dangerous, but they can really put me in some trouble. And then of course you got the ones you got the zombies that explode with them, and that is brilliant horror gaming.
Oh
right
yeah,
there.
for sure. I mean,
On its own, I could play.
Half-Life 2 is
play
borderline like borderline a horror game, right? Not full all the way, but Ravenholm might be the most famous area in Half-Life 2, but a bit later in the game, there's another area that you kind of go into, similar like the factory in Half-Life 1, called Nova Prospect, which is like this high-tech prison holding cell, right? And there's this one section in Nova Prospect where you have these turrets that you're constantly setting up to defend this.
I knew you were going to say that.
Oh yeah, that is probably my favorite shootout in the entire Half-Life series, if I'm being honest.
It's quite close as well because it's actually not that easy.
No, it's not.
and there's no way you can really get the upper hand with the turrets. You can only position them and hope for the best. I don't think there really is a way where you can set them up where the Combine can't get through.
Yeah.
You will always find yourself cornered because I think don't the turrets shoot at you as well?
Yes. Well, no, they don't. Once you have them hacked, then yeah, you're safe from them.
Either way, that sequence genuinely feels like a fight to the death.
That is the true moment where you understand, okay, I'm good at this game now. I have mastered these mechanics. And it's fantastic. Yeah,
not only that. I think the Combine are relentless at that point. At that point, because it's like 30 of them that come at you. Yeah, and it really is a bloody battle. You're climbing over the bodies by the end of it, that is another of. Along with Ravenholm and the intro sequence and all that, that's another one of my favorite moments as well.
Oh yeah, it's pretty great. And then so yeah, after you've made it through like Nova Prospect, you teleport away from that prison cell, and you're like put a week in time, a week forward in time. The entire the entire City 17 is breaking down because everybody's rebelling against Wallace Breen. Again, kind of demonstrating the Half-Life series ability to just take you from place to place to place and it feel completely natural. You eventually make it into the Dark Citadel at the end of the game, where like Half-Life 1, you have all of your weapons stripped from you. Except this time, you don't get them back. You get something completely different back.
Do you get the crowbar back at least?
No, you did not get the crowbar back.
Damn it! Okay, yep, sorry.
He's not going Freeman without the crowbar, but
David, what in my opinion, one of the coolest moments in video game history, the super gravity gun.
Oh yeah, you feel like such a badass when you
Yeah.
have that.
Oh, it's
because
great.
just like the Nova Prospect sequence with all the Combine coming at you, here they're coming at you even more. But it's I'm trying to think of another example of a sequence in other things where someone becomes so overpowered that they are literally
Neo from The
swinging-
Matrix Reloaded.
Yes, that's a good one. That's a good one. So when he's in that little park, right, and he's
Right.
knocking
Yeah.
the clones of or copies, if you like, of thank you, off of him like they're nothing, but they obviously he does get overwhelmed eventually. But it does feel like that. But then you are kind of like this relentless monster in a way, because you've got this gun that can actually pick them up.
Yeah.
And it's almost vengeful as well, because the Combine can be kind of annoying.
Yes.
And that just happens with a recurring enemy. They're just like, oh, go away, when they
Yeah.
when you think like, are you still there? I thought I shot you. You're still there, and you're trying to like pick them off from a distance and stuff like that. And then of course I'm sure we've all done this. You've dropped an enemy in a game, and you run up to the body and you shoot it another 10 times because you're like, die.
Die.
Nah, I don't wait for them that much.
But in that sequence, of course, you're literally picking them up and swinging them around like you're the Hulk in a way.
You could pick one of them up and launch them at all of his buddies and just push them all off the edge of
and
it.
the physics are great as well, because they all go flying back, and
Source
you feel
engine, man.
so powerful.
Yeah. And
Brilliant
then,
moment.
like Syndrome from The Incredibles. I just
yeah.
I
realized.
just thought of another moment. What about the sequence where you're at the top of a building in I think it's just after City 17. You're in another city, and you'll find yourself on top of a building, and you're being attacked by three what are they called?
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, they're
And
basically
you've got a
walkers.
rocket launcher with nothing but the remnants of a roof
It's awesome.
to protect you. That whole sequence is brilliant.
Yeah, there's a lot of brilliant sequence in Half-Life 2. So yeah, after you get the super gravity gun, you eventually make your way to Wallace Breen, and you defeat him. Spoiler alert.
I mean, what?
But you defeat him, and then the G-Man again comes up and gives you like this haunting conclusion to the game as the entire thing comes to a close. So
Your time will come again, I think is the line he says,
yeah,
isn't it?
something like that, something along those lines. And it came very, very soon after Half-Life 2 came out. Whenever Half-Life 2 Episode 1 and Episode 2 came out. David, have you played either of these?
I was just going to chime in there because I've not. Because the version of Half-Life 2 that I played is the OGX version.
Sure.
I've not played, as far as Half-Life in general goes, I've not played any add-ons, like Opposing Force and Blue Shift.
I don't think Opposing Force and Blue Shift, they really are just kind of add-ons. They aren't even made by the same company. Episode 1 and Episode 2, yes, they are. They are. They're made by the same company. They're essentially they're essential. They're essentially essential to the Half-Life 2 story. Since I'm the only one who's played them, I think I'll touch on them real quick. Half-Life 2 Episode 1 is great, not as fantastic as the main game. I think part of what made Half-Life 2 so special is that you, like in similar Half-Life 1 vein, you start off being incredibly weak, and eventually by the end of the game, you're awesome, but then you get it all taken away in exchange for the super gravity gun. In Episode 1, you have the super gravity gun from the start. And
cool.
It's not cool, because then you get the super gravity gun taken away, and then you start getting the weaker weapons all over again. And you're kind of just making your way through City 17 all over again, which is an area that you've already seen. They don't really venture out of City 17 that much. Episode 1 is great, but not fantastic. I mentioned it briefly earlier. I think it has probably the best escort mission in any video game that I've seen. It's this one section where you're taking these groups of 4 people back and forth across this one area, but each time there are more and more soldiers and more enemies that are kind of spreading themselves all over this area, so you have to take different tactical maneuvers. That is the one instance of a good escort mission I've seen in any video game ever. And then Episode 2, I think, is the strongest of all 3. Half-Life 2 Episode 2, yeah, you escape from City 17. City 17 blows up, and then through a bunch of different series, you go underground into where the antlions are. They're like breeding
another
grounds.
great section.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. You
It's
go into,
so
like,
bizarre.
I know, right?
That's a step backwards.
Yeah, Half-Life 2. Yeah, episode 2, you go into like their breeding grounds underground in order to save Alex from being killed. You go back into the dune buggy and drive across there. Another great shootout, probably one of my favorites, is in episode 2, where you're in like this like mansion, and you're shooting down. It's a pretty big mansion, so there are Combine soldiers both inside and outside the house. So you're constantly moving from house to house, shooting across everybody. It's great. And then once you get to the end of episode 2, one of the more famous Half-Life 2 battles is the one against, there's a bunch of walkers, like a whole ton of walkers all over like this like ranch field, and in order to take them down, you have to shoot them with this thing called the Magnuson device. What that is it's basically like this big magnetic football that you have to launch. You put it on the back of your car, and you grab it with the gravity gun, and you shoot it at the walkers, and you shoot them down with either a shotgun or something along those lines. There are a ton of them coming in, and you constantly have to be defending them. It's basically like this tactical. It turns into like somewhat of like a, I don't know, Fire Emblem strategy game almost at that point. Anyways,
but with metal footballs.
Yeah. Half-Life 2.
I'm just imagining like just Gordon Freeman just using the gun, going hut, throws it behind.
Well,
and he just gets
it's kind of shaped like that. Maybe more like lemon candies, I suppose. But regardless, that's the last battle in episode 2. And if you haven't heard of the ending of episode 2, I would be genuinely surprised, because that is the last note that we ever hear of Half-Life 2 for a long time. Eli Vance dies. Yes, and
spoilers. You forgot to say spoilers first.
Well, okay, it's a decade and a half old game at this point.
Yeah.
I have not played it, but I fully take the responsibility is mine to play it. No, so if it gets spoiled, that's my fault.
Well, Eli, Alex, and Gordon are on their way to go find the Borealis, which is a ship that Aperture Science created a long time ago, in order to I don't remember what exactly its purpose is, but it has a power on it that should be able to take out the Combine, and they're all going to go and find it. But Eli Vance dies, and
it's a portal thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a portal thing. Yeah, it's to
go to the Combine world.
Yep, that's right. And essentially, yeah, that's the last we heard of Half-Life for a very long time.
And that's quite open-ended as well, isn't it?
Yes, it's very open-ended. Real quick, I wanna say Half-Life 2, all 3 episodes, the base game and episode 2, they left an impact on the industry that I think it's one of the highest rated games of all time. I think IGN ranked it as their 8th greatest game ever made. Ironically, this is episode 8 of the Retro Rumble podcast, but Half-Life 2 probably just as influential as the first game, to be honest.
It's actually not. It's probably about episode 15, actually, because we had a couple of efforts that didn't go so well.
That's true. That's a good point. But regardless, Half-Life 2, I just played it 6 months ago, but I love that game so much, man. I'm telling you, and both of the episodes.
I'm gonna play Half-Life 2 now.
Yes, that's true. So now I want to talk about, in closing, we want to talk about something that's been a decade in the making, or a decade in the not making. We're not really sure.
It really has been that long, isn't it?
It really has been. Half-Life 3, ladies and gentlemen.
The meme, the legend.
Oh, I found so many great ones. My favorite one, I think, is probably, "Hey kids, let's count to 10. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6."
Gabe Newell cannot count to 3. I guarantee it. But yeah, over the past decade, you can imagine with such a cliffhanger like that. You can imagine over the past decade and a half that it's kind of crazy that Valve hasn't made a Half-Life 3. Like they were initially planning on releasing Half-Life 2 Episode 3. It was going to be a trilogy of episodes, but then that just kind of passed out of existence. And as
that's kind of a lot of assets that could potentially go into a third game.
I thought it was because the writer died.
Say what? Can you say that one more time?
I thought the writer died. That's why they stopped.
No. I mean, Valve.
Mark Laidlaw?
No. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. As Valve continued to go on and they released more games like Portal, which kind of gained a following of its own, and Portal 2, which is a masterpiece. They made Dota. They made Counter-Strike Go. There was no really real word from Half-Life, even though people continued to clamor for it, and kind of became this meme, until the writer for both games, Mark Laidlaw, left, I want to say late last year, and over a blog post, he detailed what I assume he considered the true story of Half-Life 3 to be like a bunch of like all the characters were like gender swapped, and he had to speak in more vague terms so as not to avoid like get copyright infringed or something along those lines. But that people, they thought Half-Life 3 had been in development for a very long time, but it felt like when Mark Laidlaw released that blog post, that kind of felt like a nail in the coffin.
I think it will happen. I just think it's going to be a wait and watch. What I don't want to happen though is for someone else to get the rights to it. Only Valve
Like
can
Microsoft.
make Half-Life 3.
That's true.
Anybody, because like it always happens with some things. Bad games are made good and games are made bad when a completely different team. Or there's no input from the previous team of any kind.
When they were bought by Microsoft,
Yeah. Like a good, yeah, a good example of that I think is the Monkey Island series, where the first two games are very, very well liked, but after that, the team kind of split up, and none of the other games did very well at all. And yeah, kind of the same with like what'd you say, Joel? The
Banjo-Kazooie.
Yeah,
when
Banjo-Kazooie.
Microsoft bought Rare.
Yep, that's another one. Rare, come back, please. Come back to Nintendo. You did so much better. But regardless, like Half-Life 3, guys, what are you thinking? You think it'll come eventually, David? You think it might be?
I just think it seems like an inevitability in a way.
Right.
But I don't want it to go down the road so long that I want it to be within the next 5 years.
It's not happening.
At least. Probably not.
I
There's
don't.
no
I
way.
don't
10
think-
years at a
I don't
push.
think it's gonna happen. I don't think it's gonna happen.
I have to side with
but
Joel on
just-
this one.
Here's what I think, though.
Look, if
Go on.
anything, I feel like they'll only make Half-Life 3 when they sell the rights to another company, and it will be made by another company, and ultimately will fail.
So
That's my opinion.
I want to know
But
why.
then again, Half-Life 2 is a different company in a way. Gearbox.
No, Half-Life 2 is no.
Nah, it's still done by
Half-Life-
Valve.
Yeah, Half-Life 2 is done by Valve. I want to know why.
Right.
Why do you think? Why do you think that they haven't released a third episode of Half-Life?
I just think it's because they've just been focusing on other things. I think Portal became a success.
Yeah.
And I just think some things, it's good to let it lie for a bit before it starts getting a bit stale.
It's been more than a bit.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, I think I say right now, not even right now, but like generally recently, there has been talk somewhere in the offices of Valve of what can we do with Half-Life 3. I reckon they are planning it, but they're just not rushing it. Because think about it, we're talking about the third part of one of the greatest video game series ever.
Yeah.
Certainly, I would argue I would definitely say if it is to be a trilogy, it would be the best first-person shooter. Well, no, it's the best first-person shooter series ever.
Yeah. It has
But
to be. Yeah.
they've got to follow up Half-Life 1 and 2. I was skeptical of Half-Life 2, but that was nailed. So they've got to do it again. So I think it is in the works.
I love your
taking
notes here.
baby steps with it.
I love what you wrote down in the notes here, David. What if it sucks? It'll be the Godfather 3 of video games. And
It would, wouldn't it? Yeah,
I
yeah.
think
Because like
there's-
some people say like it's a good film, but it's completely different from everything else.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said for that statement. Valve is known, like Blizzard, to really, really, really take their times for games, and that's something that not many other video game companies do, ever. And Blizzard and Valve are the two prime examples of that. And so I think, yeah, you have a point. If they are ever thinking about making it,
They are. They're just not rushing it out. They're not. They are doing the right thing, and they're just taking their time.
knowing Gabe Newell and knowing that team, they are going to freaking refine that game to perfection, and they're not going to release it until they are confident,
Yeah.
without a shadow of a doubt, that it will change the shape of the video game industry again.
Again, yeah, they will keep tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it until they are 100% satisfied. I'm basically repeating what you just said, but that I totally agree with you. That they could, in theory, have a working prototype even,
Yeah, maybe.
and enough assets to go. We can ship this tomorrow. but they're thinking, is it as good as Half-Life 1? Is it as good as Half-Life 2? No, let's go back to the drawing board then. Because they got to follow up 1 and 2, and that is a really hard task. It's to reference Matrix again. It was probably like when they were making Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions. That was probably one of the hardest. They were okay. They were okay. But just think of. But think of the pressure they were under there, because like the Matrix was massive. So
and they blew it.
And they did kind of cock it up, yeah. But you know, they
should have made a trilogy in the end. So.
It didn't need to be a trilogy. But anyway, back to Half-Life.
But I think, yeah. That, as you know, as aggravating as it is that Valve hasn't followed up.
Just do it within my lifetime, please.
Yeah,
that's all I ask.
Right. As annoying as it is, I think it's incredibly admirable. I think a company like that...
Would that be horrible for you if you're on your deathbed and when you open up your games magazine, it's like Half-Life 3 confirmed? No, this isn't a meme. I'm serious. Half-Life 3 is confirmed.
Oh, I can die happy.
At least the piece of reassurance
that is happening.
Me into the afterlife. No, but I think it's incredibly admirable of any company that they just don't want to release an unfinished product. You look at companies like Nintendo, probably the most influential video game developer of all time. They have made a crap ton of games, but not all of them are fantastic. A few of them are some of the greatest of all time. Probably one of them is the greatest video game ever made. But they've also put out a lot of junk. And Valve, whatever you want to say about them, I don't think they've ever put out junk. Ever.
Yeah, I don't think they've ever actually made anything that's bad.
No.
Now that I think about it.
You know,
probably because they don't like to do the whole thing where okay, it's been 3 years.
Right.
There was 3 years. Let's just say there was 3 years between Half-Life 1 and 2. So 3 years after Half-Life 3, they've got to get something out. They're not rushing anything.
Yeah.
There were so many games back in the early days of the Super NES and the Mega Drive that were really rushed out, but that's because they could do it. We're talking about much bigger games now, and also we're talking about Half-Life. So I definitely agree that it is admirable that and I'm going to say I'm fairly confident here. But if there is something in the works, just take your time with it. Just don't. I know it's been 10 years, but still, just take your time with it.
I still kind of stick by my statement though. I don't think it will happen in a realistic point of view. But I do have to admit that I do give your theory credit because it has potential. Yeah,
absolutely. So in the meantime, guys, Valve makes really great games, so look forward to Artifact, as weird as that game is looking. Have you heard about Artifact? It's like this card game that they're coming out with. People aren't too hard.
I have heard of it. Yeah. Except it's a paid game.
It's like Hearthstone, is it?
Yeah, it's a little bit hard.
It's like Hearthstone, but it's a paid game.
So Valve, they take time, and they take their time, and they make great games. So don't diss Artifact. Hey guys,
but it's a $20 game.
It is true. Hey,
the point of the online content, right, is that they're free. They're bloody free.
Whatever you want to think about Artifact.
That's part of the criteria.
Welcome to Artifact chat, guys. Hey, yo, guys, this has been an awesome chat. Honestly, I have really enjoyed talking about Half-Life. Over the past 6 months,
I could talk about Half-Life for days.
I could too. I find it fascinating that I just played this game for the first time just a few months ago. Both of these games, and they're already one of my favorite series. I think that says a lot to the
really? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. You only recently played them.
Oh yeah,
both of them.
Yeah, both of them.
Wow, okay.
Within relative proximity of each other.
Well, that does say something.
Yeah, it does say a lot.
Era. Half-Life 2 is relatively ancient in video game years now.
Oh, for sure.
Was it 2006?
2004.
I thought it was 2004.
And Half-Life 1. Half-Life 1 is nearing its 20th anniversary, and I, as a person that isn't even... I'm still a minor, can still really enjoy that game.
I was a minor when it came out, yeah. 15 and blown away by it.
I was a month old.
I was -2 old. Okay. Joel, David, any closing thoughts on this phenomenal, fantastic, divine series?
Well, I think you mentioned it earlier. I was going to mention it earlier. We were talking about I can't remember. I remember exactly what we were talking about, but I was going to chime in and say that of all the games that have been released, there are so many games that are listed as essential, games to play before you die.
Yeah.
And Half-Life 1 and 2 is certainly in that category. Probably the first one that I would add is Half-Life, definitely. Half-Life 1 and 2 together. They would just go in there together because, well, Half-Life 1 and 2 has got to go in there. If I had to make a list of games to play before you die. So I'm going to promote it on Steam. They're both on Steam right now for £7. I'm not sure that's going to convert you to dollars, but I think it's like $10. Yeah. But get it, because it is
it's wonderful.
Best bargain that I can think of for a video game for those two games. £14 for those two games, for games that you'll probably play again and again for the rest of your life, for a genuinely brilliant cinematic video game experience.
Here's what you do. You go onto Steam right now. You buy Half-Life 1, Half-Life 2, then you buy the orange box, and then you buy Portal 2, and you will have an incredible collection of some of the greatest video games of all time. Because with orange box, you'll get both, not only Portal, but you'll get Half-Life 2 Episode 1 and Half-Life 2 Episode 2. And then you
get Team Fortress and something else as well.
Yeah, Team Fortress and Portal. That's right.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So just do it.
Just play it. Just play it.
Just do it. It's great.
I would be astonished if anyone is listening to this show right now hasn't played it.
Yeah.
I would even say you're not even
Me too.
gamer if you're not even a gamer if you haven't played Half-Life, man.
You're not a PC game. You're not a PC gamer, at least, if you haven't played Half-Life.
Even if you have to get the OG Xbox version, that is a perfectly fine game. If you want to be really cheap about it, if you want to if you don't want to spend too much money, you want to buy a £2 old Xbox game.
Man,
it still looks gorgeous and it still plays brilliantly.
That game plays so much better with mouse and keyboard, though. Honestly, like both of those games.
I've not actually played. That's very interesting. I just suddenly realized that I've played the OG Half-Life. Why do I keep saying that? The original Half-Life with mouse and keyboard. I've said that like 5 times in this episode. I played that with mouse and keyboard. I did play the PS2 version. I think that gets too much stick. I think that's perfectly fine. I'm surprised we didn't chat about the Dreamcast version. That never happened.
Yeah.
And the magazine that promoted it, like they were reviewing it or had reviewed it, but it hadn't been released, so they basically were caught lying, I think. Anyway, I could be wrong. I might be misreading that, but I feel like that's what happened. Anyway, and I played Half-Life 2 with. I think that's a testament to the game design as well, because they seem to be both games that I can play with a mouse and keyboard or a controller.
That's
so
cool.
There we go.
That's awesome. Well, Joel, any parting thoughts?
Not really. Like I after playing no. Hear me out. I'm considering playing the rest of it because the rest of what you said does intrigue me.
You should.
I'll give you that much, and I do understand how influential it was, how awesome the narrative was, and how in general amazing it is. So I'm considering getting past my rage to finish it. I'm considering it.
By the way, I think
I do recommend the rest of the game, just not the bloody raft.
I do remember one thing, by the way. I think when you jump up into that tunnel, I think, I could be wrong, I think you need to turn left just as you exit because it peaks at that point.
Joel, you better finish that game or else we're going to edit you out of this podcast, whatever we upload to YouTube.
No.
You are deleted from the face of planet Earth. Goodbye, sir. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Retro Rumble podcast. I am not usually the host, but I was kind of last minute thrown onto it today. Normally, Mr. David here is our host, David White. If you don't know, if you're not aware, Culture of Gaming, we are a site dedicated to all things awesome, aka all things video games. You should go check out our site. It's cultureofgaming.com. Pretty straightforward. Also, stay tuned to Retro Rebel.
Not just games, either comics and film as well.
That's true.
Branching into that stuff.
That's true. It's our site name is a misnomer. We should be Culture of Gaming, movies, comics,
culture,
etc. Culture of culture.
Anime. Don't forget the anime.
I always forget anime, but regardless, also stay tuned because we do a Retro Rumble once a week, mostly every week, except whenever sometimes we got to take breaks. Also stay tuned to our sister podcast, Power Up Podcast, which covers more contemporary video game topics. David is not on that one because he is Retro Master Race. Trademark.
Cartridge Master Race.
Yep. Hey, and I am Ethan Braun. I'm a writer over there. I do all sorts of various things. You can find me over on Twitter at Linkachuchu, LINKACHU. David, where are you at?
The best place to follow myself is, you got two options really. You got Instagram or the Facebook. I manage both of them for Retro Rumble and my own personal ones. But my Instagram is Davey.Shiro or Davey.Shiro, DAVEY.SHIRO. And if you are a collector of video games like myself and you like the video game history, I post a lot of my collecting, and I did pick up something today that was quite unique. A very unique console, so I'll be posting pictures of that.
Awesome.
And also I basically post the same stuff to the Retro Rumble Instagram as well. So if you'd rather get the best of both worlds, I guess you could say, and have follow Retro Rumble and myself, then Retro Rumble Pod at Retro Rumble Pod would be a good place.
Joe, where are you at?
Well, obviously I'm part of the website, but
Yeah.
I also write my own fanfics and my own
Awesome.
drawings and stuff like
I
that.
didn't know that.
I am
cool.
under HK Glenstid, capital H, capital K, capital G, LENSTID. I'm on Tumblr, fanfiction.net, Archive of Our Own, and Wattpad. So you can find me there, read my stories, and a review, and tell me how terrible of a writer I am.
I'm going to freaking do that, except for the last part, because you're not a terrible writer. All right,
And,
guys.
Before we sign off, I want to say one other thing, but
Okay.
because I feel like it's not. I keep saying to myself, "Do say it," but I keep forgetting. Write to us and tell us what you think. Because I want to
Absolutely.
hear other people's thoughts on
Oh, please
Half-Life
do.
1 and 2, and episodes 1 and 2, and rumors of Half-Life 3, and whether you think it's going to happen. And because I'll be honest, we're a new podcast, so we don't get a ton of questions or responses. So it's a good chance that if you send us something, we'll read it out on the next episode.
Absolutely. That was really well put. Hey, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Retro Rumble podcast. And until next time, keep it retro.
They're waiting for you, Gordon, in the test chamber.